Hello everyone, today we are going to do overriding loan limits, and you need to understand the loan limits, and you also need to understand how it applies in circulation. So let me start with having a look at a catalog record. Okay, now in the catalog record, so we'll have a look at this one, Cat Haiku. You can see we've got 18 copies. The loan limit doesn't apply to the title. The loan limit applies to each and every barcode in the system. So if there's 18 copies, there's different loan limits can be applied to all 18 records. So if I edit this record, we'll have a look at it. And if I go into the copy section, in the copy section, you have to have a look at the loan type. You can see I've got some copies that are fortnightly loan, some copies that are daily loan. And I could, so they're all either fortnightly or daily, but I could have also had not for loan. I could have had a term loan. So there are loan limits here. Okay, you can see they're fortnightly or daily. We'll just stick with that at the moment. Now, just because I borrowed this particular item, this barcode, doesn't necessarily mean I'll get it for a fortnightly loan, because it depends on who's borrowing it. So let me just go to the patron record. So when I go down to the patron record, I'll go to patron management and I will bring up patron. So that's a staff member. Let's have a look at another patron up here. Okay. Let's have a look at this patron, and he's a year 8 patron. Okay, so the loans, every book an item has a limit, and every patron belongs in a class grade, and every class grade has a limit. Okay, so let's go to the class grade file. So down here I will go to the configuration table to look at the authority file, because I want to have a look at the class grade. So when I go to my class grade, and if I look at my year 8s, my year 8s can borrow 7 items for 14 days. But if they're borrowing a DVD, they can borrow 1 item for 5 days. Okay, I can borrow a book, so I can borrow 2 items for 14 days. Now let's get rid of these. And let's say, no, the year 8s can borrow 7 items, but they can only borrow them for 10 days. Okay, and they can only renew them for 10 days. Now, all of a sudden, if a year 8 comes to borrow an item, it says that they can borrow 7 items for 10 days. However, if I am looking at the catalog record of a book, and I'm going to borrow, so let's go to the catalog record here. Okay, so if I'm going to borrow this particular copy of that book, so this particular one, it says it's fortnightly. So if I look at my year 8, my year 8 says it's a 10-day loan period. My catalog says it's a 14-day limit, so they're different. What happens? The system says that when the item loan limit is different to the category of the patron, the loan limit here, which is 10 days, play it safe and give it out for the lowest. In this case, the lowest is going to be 10 days. So that means that even though they are, so that's 10 days, and the book is a 14-day item, it will, at circulation time, if they borrow this item, that person is going to get it for 14 days, even though it says that they are 10 days. Okay, so there's a difference. Now, what you can do is you can turn around and say, well, what happens when the item of the book is a daily loan limit? That's 1 day. And this particular patron comes to borrow, and it's a 10-day limit. Does that mean that the item's going to go out for 10 days? No. Remember the golden rule? If there's a discrepancy between the title and the borrowing limit, play it safe and go for the lowest. So in this case, if they're borrowing this item and this particular item is a daily, which is 1, so that's 1, but the patron is a 10-day patron, it'll say play it safe and give it as an overnight loan. You don't have to do anything else. So automatically when they come to borrow this item, it's an overnight loan. Okay. However, if they come to borrow this barcode, remember the play it safe rule, which says give it to the lowest. If the same patron, which was going to be borrowing this barcode here, who would normally get it for an overnight loan, but now they're going to borrow this one, which is 14 days, and the patron is a 10-day limit, they're not going to get it for 14 days because playing it safe as to which one's the lowest, the patron's limit is 10 days. So now they're going to get it for 10 days. Okay. They're going to get it for 10 days. Whoops, sorry. Let me just get there. So they can borrow 7 items and they can borrow it for 10 days. So that's the lowest. Okay. Now, it doesn't just go and calculate. It says, look, I know what the loan limit is here, and I know what the loan limit is for the patron group. I'll work out the lowest and play it safe. No, that's not the way it goes, because let's say for argument's sake that the patron is no longer a year 8 patron, and that patron is a staff member, and the staff member says that they can borrow 1,000 items and they can borrow it for 90 days. Okay, so they can borrow for 90 days. So let's go back into the catalog record. So in the catalog record, the catalog, they're going to borrow this item is a fortnightly loan, but they look at the authority file and the patron's 90 days. So therefore, catalog record will win because that's lowest. So when the catalog item, in this case, that's the lowest, which is 14 days, and the authority file says 90 days. So what's going to happen, even though this is a staff member, they're only going to get it for 14 days because you might have said that it's 90 days and the system says, I don't care that you're 90 days. I'm playing the rules safely and I'm giving it for the lowest. And 14 days in the book is less than the patron, so 14 days is what it is. Now, you can say, but that's not right, because that means if I'm borrowing loans to the teachers, even though I've set them for 90 days, they're always going to get them for 14 days. That's correct. Except if you say, I don't care what the item is, allow the patron, put that tick there, to override the item. That's what that patron override. It says, allow the patron to override whatever the book limit is. So when they come to borrow this particular book, which is a 14-day book, okay, which is the lower level than 90 days, the next check is, all right, normally I would give it to the 14-day period, except my system parameter says that the patron overrides the loan limit, so it will give it to 90 days, okay? And that's how that would work. So that's how you can override, get a 90-day patron to borrow everything in the catalog for 90 days. Okay, if the loan limit was 365 days, which is a year, and you still had that override there, when they came to borrow anything on the system, it will give it to this period because it says, I don't care about the catalog. If I borrow anything for this grouping, make sure that the patron's limit that I've put here overrides. That sounds good, except let's say for argument's sake, I did not have all these books. I just had these daily loan limits here. And the reason why I've made them all daily is because these books, let's pretend that these fortnightlies didn't exist. So let me just go and grab another catalog record. Okay, that just has another limit here. Yep, so this is a good one. So if I'm looking at Catch Me When I Fall, let's pretend that I've only got one copy. And my loan limit is going to be daily. Okay, and the reason why I've set that for daily is because this book cost me $200 and I don't want this 365-day patron coming along and borrowing my overnight limit because they've got it ticked. and borrowing it for 365 days. Okay, so remember we said if they're both the same limit, not an issue. If either of them is different, play it safe, go for the lowest. Then the next rule is that, however, if the patron is ticked to override the book limit, regardless of what the book limit is, even if it's daily, even if it costs $200, tough luck. If I've said that the patron's going to borrow it and they're going to override it, that's what it applies. However, at the end of the day, you as the administrator of the system can say, yes, but I want to force the daily. So if you want to force whatever limit is in here, regardless of the patron, you just expand that, okay? And when you expand that, it says, in this case, for this particular barcode, the item overrides everything. So it says, I don't care if that classification is the principal classification, and they can borrow whatever they want for however long they want, because I said the item overrides, it says yes. But in this case, if the patron overrides, but if I said the item overrides everything, that's the final arbiter. So it'll say, I don't care who you are, this item is whatever it says here, which is the daily limit. Okay, so just to recap again, patrons have a loan limit, which is based on their category of borrowing. Okay, it's over here. And items have a loan limit. And if either of them are different, then it'll play it safe. So it'll say, what's the item loan limit? Daily. What's the patron loan limit? 365 days. It says, no, I'm sorry, the item is lower, so therefore give it to them as a daily loan limit. Okay. Now the same would be true if the item was fortnightly and the patron was a delinquent patron that was always losing material. Okay. So if the patron's loan limit was 7 days. Okay. So now we have a situation where the book is 14 days, but the patron is a 7-day. What will happen is, because 7 days less than 14 days, it will give it to the patrons in year 8 for 7 days, because that's lower. However, before that happens, let's go to another scenario. So the next scenario is that this is an overnight loan, daily loan limit, and the patron is a staff member and they've got 90 days or 365 days, and you say that they can borrow material for 90 days. So even though that is a daily limit or a fortnightly limit, which is less than the category of patron, which is a 90 days, but because I put a tick that says they can override whatever the loan limit of the item is up to a period of 90 days, this is the loan limit that will apply. Okay? And then the final rule, if the librarian says, yes, 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 that's very well and good, but that's a daily limit because it costs too much and I've only got one copy of it, I'm going to say that the item overrides everything. So regardless of whether you were a 7-day, 365 days, or you got a tick in there or whatever, it says, I don't care, I am going to override if you borrow this particular barcode for this limit. So because it's daily, that's what's going to apply. Okay, so that's pretty simple. Now, let's say for argument's sake, you are in circulation and you're going to borrow to this group of students. And this group of students is, they can only have a 7-day loan limit, and whether it's item override or whatever, it doesn't really matter. Okay, but we'll just save that and we'll say now year 8s can borrow books for 7 days. You're in the library and you are doing circulation, and the teacher comes in with all her year 8 students and she says to you, we're doing an assignment on dinosaurs and I know our year 8 limit is 7 days, but we would like to borrow these to the end of the term. So can we bring these books back in 3 weeks or 6 weeks or in 2 months' time? You can turn around and say, yes, I've got all these automatic limits, but now you're asking me to override those limits. Really simple. All you do is you click on override the due date, and you can say to the teacher, when you're going to bring these books back? On the 22nd of October? Right. Now what you do is you can go ahead and you can call up your student, okay, and Mrs. Smith's group of students. You can call them up, okay. There's reasons for why they're not supposed to borrow, and in here you can go ahead and, let me just bring up another student, SM, okay, and we'll bring up this year 11 student, okay, borrowing status. Okay, so now I want to borrow a book to the student, and the book I want to borrow is that barcode, but I have said I want the book back on that date. Now watch what happens when I go and borrow a book out to this particular person, right? It's telling you issues about the book, that it was on loan. Do you want to sort of check it in and check it out? And I go, yep, it's checked in and checked it out. But have a look at the due date, okay? The due date is the 22nd of the 10th. So what I've actually done, I have overridden the item limit, I've overridden the patron limit, I've overridden the fact that the patron has a tick box that says they can override all the limits. I've also overridden the fact that the librarian has said this is a very expensive book, $200, and it's only overnight. I've even overridden that by putting that date in there, and I've basically said it's circulation. I don't care what the limits are. I want this date to apply for this group of students, and there it is. Okay, so you can set up all those manual and automatic limits, but regardless of what you set up, you can override everything by just putting that in there. Okay, and that's how you will go and override loan limits on the system. Thank you very much.